Let her drown. Those words would echo across every news channel, every courtroom, every dark corner of the internet for months to come. Debbie crouched at the edge of the Roosevelt Bridge, rain hammering her bare shoulders, her torn sneakers slipping on wet concrete. Below, black water churned beneath flashing red and blue lights. A metal cage sank fast, chains rattling against steel, bubbles erupting like screams from the depths. Inside that cage, handcuffed and barely conscious, was Mancuso, the ghost the city feared but pretended didn't exist. 2 officers stood 5 feet behind her, radios crackling with coded commands. One of them, a stocky sergeant with a badge that caught the lightning, pointed at the disappearing cage and laughed. "Let her drown," he repeated, nudging his partner. Problem solved. Except he wasn't talking about the cage. He was talking about Debbie. Because the moment she'd appeared on this bridge, soaked and shaking, they'd recognized what she was, invisible. The kind of homeless girl people looked through, not at. The kind that didn't matter. Debbie's fingers gripped the railing, knuckles white against rusted metal. Every instinct screamed at her to run. These same cops had chased her from alleyways before, shoved her face first into dumpsters, told her she'd die cold and forgotten. Last month, one of them had emptied her only backpack into a storm drain just to watch her cry. She should walk away. She should disappear into the rain like she always did. But then she heard it, the muffled pounding from underwater. Metal against metal. A rhythm that sounded almost like knocking, like someone asking for help. The sound triggered something buried deep. A memory crashed through her mind. Her mother's fists pounding on their apartment door 7 years ago, begging neighbors to call 911 while her father's rage shook the walls. Debbie had been 10, hiding in a closet, listening to her mother scream for help that never came. 23 doors in that hallway. Not one opened. Have you ever watched someone choose mercy when the world chose cruelty? If this story made you believe that one person can change the world, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that mercy is never weakness. Subscribe for more stories about the forgotten ones who refused to stay silent. Debbie's body moved before her mind could stop it. She jumped. The freezing water hit her like a hammer, driving the air from her lungs. The river swallowed her whole, dragging her down into darkness so complete she couldn't tell up from down. Her ears filled with pressure, her chest screaming for oxygen she couldn't give it. Through the murky water she saw the cage, a twisted metal box spinning as it sank, chains wrapped around it like serpents. The man inside wasn't moving anymore. His head lolled against the bars, blood trailing from a gash above his eye, dissolving into the current like red smoke. Debbie kicked hard, ignoring the cold that bit through her skin, through her muscles, straight into her bones. Her hands found the cage and immediately started bleeding. The metal was ancient, corroded, edges sharp as broken glass. She didn't care. Her fingers searched frantically for a latch, a lock, anything. There. A rusted padlock hanging loose on a bent hinge. She grabbed a piece of broken rebar floating past, probably from the bridge construction upstream, and jammed it into the lock mechanism. Her lungs were fire now, her vision starting to blur at the edges. Black spots danced across her eyes. The lock wouldn't budge. Through the bars, Mancuso's eyes suddenly opened. They locked onto hers, confused, furious, afraid. His mouth moved, forming words she couldn't hear. "Leave me." Debbie shook her head violently. She twisted the rebar with both hands, feeling her palms split open, feeling warm blood mix with cold river water. The veins in her neck bulged. Her body convulsed, desperate for air. The lock broke. She tore the cage door open, the rusted hinges shrieking even underwater. Mancuso's weight pulled her deeper as she grabbed his jacket and kicked toward the surface. He was dead weight, 200 pounds of unconscious muscle and bone. Her legs burned. Her arms felt like they were tearing from their sockets. The surface was impossibly far. But she dragged her mother out of that apartment 7 years ago when the beating finally stopped. She'd been 70 pounds lighter then, her mother twice her size, and she'd done it anyway. She'd do it again now. They broke the surface gasping, choking, alive. Rain pelted their faces. Police lights painted everything in strobing red and blue. Debbie's arms moved on instinct, dragging Mancuso through the water toward the muddy riverbank. Her feet found purchase on slippery rocks. She pulled. He slid. She pulled again. The officers on the bridge stood frozen, radios falling from their hands. One of them, the sergeant, started shouting into his shoulder mic, but the words were lost in the storm. Debbie collapsed on the riverbank, her entire body shaking so violently she thought her bones might break. Mancuso lay beside her, coughing up river water, his handcuffs still locked around his wrists. Blood streamed from cuts on his face, his arms, his chest. She didn't know who he was. Didn't recognize the face that appeared on news reports and wanted posters. She just saw a man who'd nearly drowned. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped her torn denim jacket from around her waist. It was barely a jacket anymore. More holes than fabric, stained with 3 years of street life. But it was all she had. She wrapped it around his bleeding wrists, tying the sleeves tight to slow the blood flow. Her hands were clumsy, uncoordinated from cold and adrenaline. The knot was sloppy, but it held. Mancuso's eyes focused on her face. His mouth opened, forming a question. Debbie didn't let him ask it. "Run," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the rain, over the sirens, over the helicopter blades cutting through the storm somewhere above. But he heard her. Those were the only words she said before forcing herself to stand, to move, to disappear into the rain-soaked darkness. Her legs nearly buckled. Her vision swam. But she ran anyway, leaving behind nothing but bloody footprints that the storm would wash away within seconds. Behind her, Mancuso stared at the space where she'd been, water streaming down his face, mixing with something that might have been tears or might have been river water. His hands closed around the jacket she'd left him, feeling its warmth against his frozen skin. Then he too vanished into the night. The officers finally moved, scrambling down to the riverbank with flashlights cutting through the darkness. The sergeant, Dawkins, grabbed his phone with shaking hands and started recording the empty, muddy slope. His mind was already spinning the story, already turning rescue into conspiracy, already transforming mercy into crime. 3 blocks away, Debbie collapsed in an alley behind a closed Chinese restaurant, her body finally giving out. She pressed her torn, bleeding hands against the brick wall and vomited river water onto the pavement. Her reflection stared back at her from a puddle, soaked hair plastered to her skull, eyes wide with shock, face pale as death. She looked like a ghost. She didn't know that within 12 hours, she would become one. A ghost the entire world would hunt. Above the alley, A security camera's red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Inside the precinct command center, the lights never went off. Officers moved between computer stations, radios crackling with updates, screens glowing with live feeds from helicopters still circling the Roosevelt Bridge. Sergeant Dawkins sat in a conference room, his wet uniform clinging to his body, a styrofoam cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Across from him, 3 investigators waited with notepads and recording devices. He'd done this dance many times before. Spin the story. Control the narrative. Make himself the hero. The system always believed cops over criminals, especially when those criminals looked like her. Dawkins cleared his throat and began. Last night at approximately 9:47 p.m., we conducted a high-risk operation targeting Vincent Mancuso, wanted on 14 federal charges including racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. His voice was steady, practiced, empty of the panic he'd felt on that bridge. During the pursuit, Mancuso's vehicle crashed through the Roosevelt Bridge barrier. Standard protocol required immediate water rescue, which we initiated. However, an unidentified female suspect interfered with the operation. One of the investigators, a sharp-eyed woman named Torres, leaned forward. Interfered how? She appeared on the bridge during the rescue attempt. When ordered to clear the area for her own safety, she refused and jumped into the river. To save him? Torres asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. Dawkins's jaw tightened. To facilitate his escape, yes. He pulled out his phone, swiping to footage he'd carefully edited. The video showed Debbie on the bridge, showed her jumping, but the audio, the part where he'd said, "let her drown," was conspicuously absent. Note her lack of hesitation, Dawkins continued, pointing at the screen. No panic response. No fear. This is someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The footage cut to grainy underwater shots from the helicopter's thermal camera, showing 2 heat signatures moving through the water. It looked coordinated, planned, professional. It looked nothing like what actually happened. We've identified her through facial recognition, another investigator added, sliding a folder across the table. Debbie Watson, 17 years old. No permanent address for the past 3 years. Multiple trespassing violations, petty theft, loitering arrests. Torres frowned at the file. So how does a homeless teenager end up orchestrating a mafia boss's escape? That's what we're trying to determine, Dawkins replied smoothly. But the evidence suggests she's been working as an asset for the Mancuso organization, possibly as a courier or lookout. Her homeless status would make her invisible, perfect for surveillance. In the observation room next door, Officer Park watched through one-way glass, his hands clenched into fists. He'd been on that bridge. He'd seen Debbie's hand shaking, seen her bleeding palms, seen the genuine terror in her eyes when she'd surfaced. This wasn't that. This was a lie. But when he opened his mouth to say so, his partner, Officer Rodriguez, put a hand on his shoulder and shook his head. "Don't," Rodriguez whispered. "You know how this works." Park did know. He'd seen good cops destroyed for telling inconvenient truths. He'd watched whistleblowers lose their badges, their pensions, their futures. So he said nothing. And the lie grew stronger in the silence. By dawn, Debbie's face was everywhere. Every news station. Every website. Every social media feed. The headlines screamed betrayal and conspiracy. Mafia boss freed by mystery accomplice. Homeless teen linked to organized crime. Most wanted. Who is Debbie Watson? The mayor held a press conference, promising swift justice. The police commissioner pledged every resource. Federal agencies announced their involvement. The reward started at $50,000 and climbed to $500,000 within hours. And in a condemned apartment building 17 blocks from the Roosevelt Bridge, Debbie sat on a bare floor watching her own face scroll across a stolen phone. Her hands were wrapped in strips of cloth torn from a moldy curtain. Her body still shook from cold that wouldn't fade. The phone screen showed her picture next to Mancuso's mugshot. The caption read, "Partners in crime." She'd saved his life. The world called it treason. Her finger hovered over the power button, about to turn the phone off, when a new notification appeared. A video. Anonymous upload. No title. Those were the only words she said before forcing herself to stand, to move, to disappear into the rain-soaked darkness. Her legs nearly buckled. Her vision swam. But she ran anyway, leaving behind nothing but bloody footprints that the storm would wash away within seconds. Behind her, Mancuso stared at the space where she'd been, water streaming down his face, mixing with something that might have been tears or might have been river water. His hands closed around the jacket she'd left him, feeling its warmth against his frozen skin. Then he too vanished into the night. The officers finally moved, scrambling down to the riverbank with flashlights cutting through the darkness. The sergeant, Dawkins, grabbed his phone with shaking hands and started recording the empty, muddy slope. His mind was already spinning the story, already turning rescue into conspiracy, already transforming mercy into crime. 3 blocks away, Debbie collapsed in an alley behind a closed Chinese restaurant, her body finally giving out. She pressed her torn, bleeding hands against the brick wall and vomited river water onto the pavement. Her reflection stared back at her from a puddle, soaked hair plastered to her skull, eyes wide with shock, face pale as death. She looked like a ghost. She didn't know that within 12 hours, she would become one. A ghost the entire world would hunt. Above the alley, a security camera's red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Inside the precinct command center, the lights never went off. Officers moved between computer stations, radios crackling with updates, screens glowing with live feeds from helicopters still circling the Roosevelt Bridge. Sergeant Dawkins sat in a conference room, his wet uniform clinging to his body, a styrofoam cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Across from him, 3 investigators waited with notepads and recording devices. He'd done this dance many times before. Spin the story. Control the narrative. Make himself the hero. The system always believed cops over criminals, especially when those criminals looked like her. Dawkins cleared his throat and began. Last night, at approximately 9:47 p.m., we conducted a high-risk operation targeting Vincent Mancuso, wanted on 14 federal charges including racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. His voice was steady, practiced, empty of the panic he'd felt on that bridge. During the pursuit, Mancuso's vehicle crashed through the Roosevelt Bridge barrier. Standard protocol required immediate water rescue, which we initiated. However, an unidentified female suspect interfered with the operation. One of the investigators, a sharp-eyed woman named Torres, leaned forward. Interfered how? She appeared on the bridge during the rescue attempt. When ordered to clear the area for her own safety, she refused and jumped into the river. To save him, Torres asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. Dawkins's jaw tightened. To facilitate his escape, yes. He pulled out his phone, swiping to footage he'd carefully edited. The video showed Debbie on the bridge, showed her jumping, but the audio, the part where he'd said, "Let her drown," was conspicuously absent. Note her lack of hesitation, Dawkins continued, pointing at the screen. No panic response. No fear. This is someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The footage cut to grainy underwater shots from the helicopter's thermal camera, showing two heat signatures moving through the water. It looked coordinated, planned, professional. It looked nothing like what actually happened. "We've identified her through facial recognition," another investigator added, sliding a folder across the table. Debbie Watson, 17 years old. No permanent address for the past 3 years. Multiple trespassing violations, petty theft, loitering arrests. Torres frowned at the file. So how does a homeless teenager end up orchestrating a mafia boss's escape? "That's what we're trying to determine," Dawkins replied smoothly. "But the evidence suggests she's been working as an asset for the Mancuso organization, possibly as a courier or lookout. Her homeless status would make her invisible, perfect for surveillance." In the observation room next door, Officer Park watched through one-way glass, his hands clenched into fists. He'd been on that bridge. He'd seen Debbie's hands shaking, seen her bleeding palms, seen the genuine terror in her eyes when she'd surfaced. This wasn't that. This was a lie. But when he opened his mouth to say so, his partner, Officer Rodriguez, put a hand on his shoulder and shook his head. "Don't," Rodriguez whispered. "You know how this works." Park did know. He'd seen good cops destroyed for telling inconvenient truths. He'd watched whistleblowers lose their badges, their pensions, their futures. So he said nothing. And the lie grew stronger in the silence. By dawn, Debbie's face was everywhere. Every news station. Every website. Every social media feed. The headlines screamed betrayal and conspiracy. Mafia boss freed by mystery accomplice. Homeless teen linked to organized crime. Most wanted. Who is Debbie Watson? The mayor held a press conference, promising swift justice. The police commissioner pledged every resource. Federal agencies announced their involvement. The reward started at $50,000 and climbed to $500,000 within hours. And in a condemned apartment building 17 blocks from the Roosevelt Bridge, Debbie sat on a bare floor watching her own face scroll across a stolen phone. Her hands were wrapped in strips of cloth torn from a moldy curtain. Her body still shook from cold that wouldn't fade. The phone screen showed her picture next to Mancuso's mugshot. The caption read, "Partners in crime." She'd saved his life. The world called it treason. Her finger hovered over the power button, about to turn the phone off, when a new notification appeared. A video. Anonymous upload. No title. She clicked it. The footage was dark, shaky, but clear enough. A security camera from a building near the bridge. The angle showed everything the official version didn't. It showed Dawkins laughing. It showed him pointing at her, saying words she couldn't quite hear. It showed him shoving her toward the railing. It showed the truth. Debbie's breath caught in her throat. Someone else knew. Someone had sent this to her specifically. The upload was tagged to a burner number she'd used once to call a shelter 3 months ago. Someone was watching. The video ended with a single line of text. "They're coming for you. But you pulled out more than a man from that river. You pulled out a secret that will burn this city to the ground. Run, Debbie Watson. And when you're ready to fight back, we'll find you." The phone died. The screen went black. And Debbie understood, finally, that mercy hadn't saved her. Mercy had made her the most dangerous person alive. 3 years earlier, Debbie Watson had been a different person. She'd had a home, a bed, a mother who sang off-key while making breakfast, and a father who promised things would get better even as his fists proved otherwise. She'd been 14 when her mother finally stopped breathing on their Kit Watson floor, the paramedics arriving 17 minutes too late because dispatch had flagged their address as frequent callers, possible hoax. She'd been 14 when she realized that help doesn't come for people like her. That sometimes you're the only help there is. 30 seconds before the jump, Debbie's entire body trembled on the Roosevelt Bridge, rain plastering her hair to her skull. The sergeant's laughter still echoed in her ears, that cruel, dismissive sound that said she wasn't worth the breath it took to speak her name. Let her drown. Below, the cage sank deeper, spinning slowly as it descended into darkness. The man inside had stopped moving. His head lolled against the bars like a puppet with cut strings. Debbie's fingers gripped the rusted railing until her knuckles went white. Every rational thought screamed at her to walk away. This wasn't her fight. That man in the cage, whoever he was, had probably done terrible things to end up there. The kind of things that made cops willing to watch him drown. She should leave. She should survive. She should. The pounding started again. Faint. Desperate. Metal against metal. Growing weaker with each strike. And suddenly, Debbie wasn't on a bridge anymore. She was 10 years old, sitting in her elementary school office, the principal's voice droning on about behavioral concerns, while her mother sat in the hallway. Through the thin walls, she could hear her mother's muffled sobs, the phone pressed to her ear as she begged someone, anyone, to help. "Please," her mother had whispered. "He's going to kill me. I know he is. Please, I'm begging you." The 911 dispatcher had put her on hold. 23 minutes on hold while her father waited at home, his rage growing colder and sharper with every passing second. No one helped. No one came. Debbie jumped. The water was a wall of ice that shattered against her body, driving every particle of air from her lungs. The river swallowed her whole, dragging her down into absolute darkness. No up, no down, just freezing, suffocating black. Her eyes burned as she forced them open. Through the murky water, she could barely make out the cage, a twisted silhouette spinning as it sank, chains wrapped around it like the tentacles of some mechanical beast. She kicked hard, her torn sneakers slipping off her feet and disappearing into the depths. Her hands found the cage and immediately erupted in pain. The metal was ancient, corroded, every edge sharp as a razor. Blood bloomed in the water around her fingers, dark ribbons that dissolved into the current. Inside the cage, the man's eyes suddenly opened. For one suspended moment, Debbie and Mancuso stared at each other through the bars. His face was brutal in its architecture. Sharp cheekbones, a nose that had been broken and reset multiple times, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. This was a face that had lived through violence, had probably caused plenty of it too. The kind of face that appeared on wanted posters and crime documentaries. But Debbie didn't recognize him. All she saw was terror. Pure, animal terror. The same expression her mother had worn that last morning when the ambulance lights finally arrived too late. Mancuso's mouth moved, forming words underwater. "Leave me." His eyes were fierce, commanding, even as blood streamed from the gash above his temple. Debbie's lungs were screaming now, her chest convulsing with the need to breathe. Black spots danced across her vision. She had maybe 15 seconds of consciousness left. She shook her head violently. Her hands searched frantically along the cage door, fingers slipping on blood-slicked metal. There, a rusted padlock, corroded almost beyond recognition, hanging from a twisted hinge. A piece of broken rebar floated past, probably debris from the bridge construction upstream. Debbie grabbed it with both hands and jammed it into the lock mechanism. The lock didn't budge. Her mother's voice echoed through her mind, that last morning before everything ended. "Baby, promise me something. Promise me you'll never walk past someone who needs help. Promise me you'll be better than this world." Debbie twisted the rebar with everything she had. Her palms split open completely, skin tearing away from muscle. The veins in her neck bulged. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. The lock shattered. She tore the cage door open, the hinges shrieking even underwater. Mancuso's deadweight pulled her deeper. 200 pounds of unconscious muscle and bone. She grabbed his jacket and kicked toward the surface that seemed impossibly far away. Her legs burned like they were on fire. Her arms felt like they were tearing from their sockets. The surface was a faint glow somewhere above, getting dimmer with every second. Kick. Her mother's face flashed through her mind. Kick. The dispatcher's bored voice. "Ma'am, are you sure this is an emergency?" Kick. Her mother's body on the Kit Watson floor, eyes open but empty. Kick. They broke the surface. Air exploded into Debbie's lungs. Beautiful, burning, impossible air. She choked and gasped and dragged Mancuso through the water toward the muddy riverbank. Rain hammered her face. Police lights strobed red and blue across the churning water. Her feet found slippery rocks. She pulled. Mancuso slid. She pulled again, her muscles screaming in protest. On the bridge above, the officers stood frozen. Their radios had fallen silent. Even the helicopter seemed to hover uncertainly, its searchlight sweeping back and forth across the water. They'd expected one body. Maybe two. Not this. Debbie collapsed on the muddy bank, her entire body convulsing so violently she thought her spine might snap. Mancuso lay beside her, coughing up river water, his handcuffs still locked tight around his bleeding wrists. She didn't know his name, didn't know his crimes, didn't know the empire of fear he'd built or the blood on his hands. She just knew he was alive because she'd refused to walk away. With trembling fingers, she unwrapped her denim jacket from around her waist. It was barely held together anymore. More holes than fabric, stained with 3 years of survival. But it was warm. It was hers. She wrapped it around his wrists, tying the sleeves over the handcuff wounds to slow the bleeding. Her hands were so clumsy from cold and pain that the knot was sloppy, barely holding. But it held. Mancuso's eyes focused on her face. Really looked at her. This soaking, shivering girl with bleeding hands and hollow eyes. His mouth opened, forming a question she couldn't let him ask. Run. The word came out as barely a whisper, swallowed almost immediately by the storm. But he heard it. She saw the understanding flash across his face, saw the confusion that followed. Why would she save him just to let him go? Debbie didn't have an answer. She just knew that mercy shouldn't come with conditions. Before he could respond, before the paralyzed officers could shake off their shock, before the helicopter's spotlight could find them, Debbie forced herself to stand. Her legs nearly gave out. Her vision swam. Blood dripped from her hands onto the mud. But she ran. Into the rain-soaked darkness, into the maze of alleys she knew better than any map, into the shadows that had been her home for 3 years. Behind her, Mancuso stared at the space where she'd been, his hands clutching the torn jacket she'd left him. Water streamed down his face, mixing with something that looked too much like tears. Then he too vanished into the night. On the bridge, the world suddenly snapped back into motion. Sergeant Dawkins grabbed his radio, his hand shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. All units, suspects have fled the scene. Repeat, both suspects. He stopped, looked down at the empty riverbank, looked at his partner whose phone was already out. Camera pointed at the mud where bloody footprints were being washed away by the rain. And in that moment, Dawkins made a choice that would change everything. Both suspects have fled together, he said into the radio, his voice suddenly steady. Armed and dangerous. Female accomplice approximately 17 years old. Considering them a coordinated escape team. His partner's camera kept rolling. Above them, 3 news helicopters that had been following the police chase suddenly had a new story. Not a rescue. A conspiracy. The sirens turned back on, louder now, more urgent, multiplying as backup units screamed toward the bridge from every direction. And somewhere in the command center downtown, a technician was already pulling security footage, already running facial recognition, already building the case that would turn Debbie Watson from invisible to infamous. The cameras had started rolling. And they would never stop. Debbie woke to the sound of her own name. Not whispered. Not spoken. Screamed across every frequency the city could broadcast. She'd collapsed in an abandoned laundromat 3 blocks from the river. Her body finally giving out around 3 a.m. Now, pale morning light filtered through boarded windows, and a radio somewhere in the building crackled to life. 17-year-old Debbie Watson, wanted in connection with last night's brazen escape of notorious crime boss Vincent Mancuso. Police are calling this a coordinated operation. Debbie's eyes snapped open. Her hands were still wrapped in strips of cloth, crusted brown with dried blood. Every muscle in her body screamed as she forced herself to sit up. The jacket she'd given Mancuso was gone, of course. Now she wore only a thin tank top and jeans that were still damp from the river. She stumbled to the laundromat's front window, peering through a crack in the boards. Across the street, an electronics store had its display TVs running on emergency power. All 12 screens showed the same image. Her face. Debbie's breath caught in her throat. It was footage from the bridge. Grainy security camera angles, enhanced and sharpened until her features were unmistakable. Her wet hair. Her wide eyes. Her hands gripping the railing before she jumped. But the footage had been edited, cut, manipulated. It showed her jumping, but not the officers laughing. It showed her pulling Mancuso from the water, but not her bleeding hands or desperate struggle. It showed her whispering to him, but the caption beneath read, "Suspect gives escape instructions." The news anchor's voice boomed through the broken window. Authorities believe Watson may have been working as a criminal asset for the Mancuso organization for months, possibly years. Her homeless status made her virtually invisible, the perfect inside operative. Another screen cut to Mayor Patricia Holland at a press conference, her face grave and determined. "Let me be absolutely clear. This girl is not a victim. She is an accomplice to one of the most dangerous criminals in our city's history. We will find her. We will bring her to justice." Debbie's legs gave out. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the filthy tile floor, staring at her own face multiplied across a dozen screens. Accomplice. Criminal asset. Coordinated operation. The words didn't make sense. She'd saved a drowning man. That was all. She hadn't known who he was, hadn't cared about his crimes or his empire. She'd just refused to let someone die when she had the power to prevent it. How had mercy become treason? Another channel flashed on screen, this time showing photos they'd pulled from somewhere. Her middle school yearbook picture, 7 years old, her face rounder and hopeful. Her mother's obituary photo. A police report from 2 years ago when she'd been arrested for sleeping in a subway station. They were building a story, a narrative, turning her entire life into evidence of guilt. Sources indicate Watson has a history of anti-authority behavior, multiple arrests, and documented mental health concerns. Mental health concerns. Because she'd cried when they dragged her away from her mother's grave. Debbie's hands clenched into fists, fresh blood seeping through the cloth wrappings. She needed to move. Needed to think. Needed to. Her reflection appeared in the laundromat's cracked mirror across the room. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. Her face was gaunt, pale, streaked with dirt and dried blood. Her eyes looked hollow, haunted. She looked like exactly what they were calling her. A criminal. By noon, Debbie had made it to the warehouse district on the city's east side, a maze of abandoned buildings and forgotten spaces where homeless kids like her usually found temporary refuge. Usually. Today, the streets were empty. Silent. Wrong. She crept through an alley, her bare feet, she'd lost both sneakers in the river, silent on broken concrete. Ahead, a convenience store still had power, its fluorescent lights buzzing. The owner was standing outside, smoking and watching the news on his phone. Debbie needed food, water, supplies. She approached the store from an angle, keeping her face turned away from the street. Inside, she grabbed a bottle of water and a protein bar, moving quickly toward the back where the owner kept day-old bread he usually let her have for free. Then she saw the TV mounted behind the register. Her face. Again. But this time, it was split screen with Mancuso's mugshot. The caption read, "Partners in crime. The shocking truth." A ticker scrolled across the bottom. Reward fund reaches $100,000 for information leading to capture. Debbie froze. The store owner looked up from his phone, looked at the TV, looked at her. Their eyes met. She saw the recognition flash across his face, saw his hand move toward his phone. Debbie dropped the water bottle and ran. Behind her, the owner was already shouting, already calling 911, already sealing her fate with every word. She burst onto the street and immediately knew she'd made a mistake. 3 men stood at the end of the block. Not cops. Their suits were too expensive, too tailored. Their stance was wrong, predatory rather than procedural. Rival family. Had to be. The one in front smiled when he saw her. Well, well. The famous Debbie Watson. She turned to run the other way. 2 more men appeared, blocking the alley exit. Mancuso really picked an interesting little guardian angel, the first man continued, walking toward her slowly. Our boss is very curious about why he'd risk everything for a street rat. Debbie's back hit the brick wall. Her eyes darted left and right, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. He wants to ask you some questions, the man said, pulling a gun from inside his jacket. Preferably while you're still breathing, but honestly, dead works too. The gun rose. Debbie's entire body tensed, preparing to. Glass exploded above them. A fire escape ladder crashed down, barely missing the gunman's head. Someone was on the roof, a figure in black, face covered, moving fast. G.O. The figure shouted down at her. Debbie didn't hesitate. She dove through the gap between 2 buildings, scrambling over trash and debris while gunshots cracked behind her. Her feet were bleeding, her lungs burning, but she didn't stop. She ran for 6 blocks before finally collapsing behind a dumpster, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might explode. Who was that on the roof? Who had saved her? She didn't have time to figure it out. Her stolen phone, the one from last night, buzzed in her pocket. A new message from the same anonymous number. They're not the only ones hunting you. Every crime family in the city wants Mancuso dead. They think you know where he is. You have 24 hours before the Real killers find you. Below that, a link. Debbie clicked it with trembling fingers. A news broadcast loaded, this time from a national network. A senator was speaking, his face red with righteous fury. And I am personally authorizing a federal bounty of $500,000 for the capture of Debbie Watson, dead or alive. This terrorist cannot be allowed to remain free. Terrorist. The word echoed in her mind. 24 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was the most wanted person in America. The phone buzzed again. Same number. Stop running. Start fighting. Or die trying. M. Mancuso. Debbie stared at the message, her blood-wrapped hands shaking. The man she'd saved was watching her, and the price of mercy had just become her life. By the 3rd day, Debbie's face had been on television for 62 consecutive hours. But it wasn't her face anymore. Not really. They'd turned her into someone else entirely. Police headquarters. Evidence fabrication unit. Detective Sarah Kim sat in a windowless room surrounded by monitors, building a monster. On her left screen, Debbie Watson's actual history. Homeless at 14 after her mother's death. Arrested twice for trespassing, sleeping in subway stations. 3 warnings for loitering. 1 citation for stealing food from a convenience store. A tragedy. A victim of the system. On her right screen, the version they were releasing to the public. The subject demonstrated sophisticated evasion techniques consistent with professional training, Kim typed, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Multiple arrests indicate pattern of criminal behavior escalating over 3-year period. Her supervisor, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, leaned over her shoulder. Make the shelter records work. Kim pulled up files from St. Catherine's Youth Shelter, where Debbie had stayed for 6 months 2 years ago. The notes were heartbreaking. Debbie is withdrawn but not dangerous. Nightmares about her mother. Needs trauma counseling, not punishment. Kim's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she started rewriting. Subject displayed antisocial tendencies and resistance to authority. Staff reported concerning behavior including secretive meetings and unexplained absences. Suspected gang affiliation. Perfect, Webb said. Now add the witnesses. Kim opened another file. 3 sworn statements from people claiming to have seen Debbie meeting with known Mancuso associates. The witnesses' names were real. Their statements were fiction. But they'd all accepted payment to sign them. One was a former shelter worker who'd been fired for stealing. Another was a convenience store owner who owed the police department favors. The third was a homeless man who'd do anything for a hot meal and immunity from arrest. All 3 now swore they'd seen Debbie Watson operating as Mancuso's street-level asset for over a year. This goes live in 1 hour, Webb said, checking his watch. By tonight, even her own mother wouldn't recognize the girl we're describing. Kim's jaw tightened. Her mother is dead, sir. Even better, Webb replied. No one to contradict the narrative. If Debbie's story gave you chills, smash that like button. Share this with someone who's ever felt invisible or powerless. Remind them that the smallest act of courage can topple empires. Subscribe because the world needs more stories about people who choose truth over survival. Abandoned textile factory. East District. Debbie sat in the dark, her back against a concrete pillar, watching her life dissolve on a cracked tablet she'd stolen from a sleeping businessman. The press conference was streaming live. Commissioner Holland stood at a podium, flanked by federal agents and city officials. Behind her, a massive screen displayed evidence, photos, documents, testimony transcripts. We now have conclusive proof that Debbie Watson was operating as a trained operative within the Mancuso crime network, Holland announced, her voice steady and authoritative. She was not an innocent bystander. She was an asset. The screen changed to show Debbie's shelter records. Except they weren't her records. Not anymore. Antisocial tendencies. Gang affiliation. Resistance to authority. Words that had never appeared in any real file about her. A reporter shouted a question. When did you first identify her as a suspect? We've been tracking Watson for approximately 18 months. A federal agent responded smoothly. She was part of a larger investigation into Mancuso's street operations. Debbie's hands trembled. 18 months ago, she'd been sleeping in subway cars and digging through restaurant dumpsters. Nobody had been tracking her. Nobody had even known she existed. The press conference continued. We have multiple witnesses who can place Watson at known Mancuso meeting locations. The first witness appeared on screen, a middle-aged man Debbie had never seen before in her life. Yeah, I seen her, he said, his voice gravelly. She'd come around the warehouse district, always on her phone, always watching. Real careful, like she was trained or something. Debbie had never owned a phone until 3 days ago. Another witness. She threatened me once, told me to stay away from certain blocks. Said her people would hurt me if I talked. Debbie had never threatened anyone in her life. A third, I watched her pass envelopes to men in expensive cars. Cash, probably. Or drugs. She was definitely working for someone. 3 strangers. 3 lies. 3 people willing to destroy her for money or immunity or whatever they'd been offered. And the world was believing every word. Debbie scrolled through social media on the stolen tablet. Comment sections exploded with rage. She deserves everything coming to her. Another criminal playing victim. Should have let them both drown. Death penalty. Period. A few voices tried to defend her, tried to question the narrative. They were immediately drowned out, attacked, silenced. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She'd eaten half a protein bar in 3 days, stolen from a gas station trash can. Her wrapped hands were infected now, red lines spreading up her arms. She was dying slowly. And nobody cared because they'd turned her into something that deserved to die. Unknown location. Mancuso's safe house. Vincent Mancuso sat in a leather chair, watching the same press conference on a wall of monitors. His jaw was still bruised from the underwater impact. His wrists bore the marks of handcuffs and a torn denim jacket. Debbie's jacket lay across his lap. Beside him stood Carlo, his oldest lieutenant. "Boss, they're saying the girl was working for us." "She wasn't," Mancuso replied quietly. "I know that. You know that. But they're building a case that'll put her away forever. Maybe execute her." Carlo paused. "Why do you care? She's nobody." Mancuso's fingers traced the ragged edge of Debbie's jacket. "She saved my life. So, we could disappear. Let this blow over. The girl's not our problem." Mancuso stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city glittered with lights and lies. "Carlo, why was I in that cage?" Carlo shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, we don't need to. Why was I in a cage at the bottom of the river?" Mancuso's voice was steel. A long silence. "Your own counsel ordered it," Carlo finally admitted. "After you refused the Kozlov deal." The Kozlov deal. Child trafficking routes from Eastern Europe. $30 million in profit. Mancuso had killed the negotiator with his bare hands and told the Russian mob to never contact him again. 2 days later, dirty cops had arrested him during a staged chase. The cage wasn't police protocol. It was an execution disguised as justice. "They wanted me gone," Mancuso said, more to himself than Carlo. "The cops, the council, the politicians, everyone who profited from Kozlov's pipelines." "Yeah. And they almost succeeded. Except for her." Mancuso turned from the window. "That girl, that nobody, she ruined everything. She pulled me out. She made me visible. Boss, where are you going with this?" Mancuso's eyes were cold and calculating. Who else knows what really happened that night? "Well, the cops who were there. Your council. The politicians on Kozlov's payroll." Carlo's face paled as he understood. "And the girl." "The girl," Mancuso repeated softly. "But she doesn't know anything. She just jumped in and... she's the only witness who wasn't part of the plan." Mancuso's voice was barely above a whisper. She's the only person who can prove I was being executed, not arrested. She's the only one who saw the truth. Carlos stepped closer. Boss, if they realize that. They already have. Mancuso pointed at the press conference, now showing Debbie's face with the word terrorist in red letters. This isn't about escaping arrest. This is about burying the truth. They're not hunting her because she helped you escape. No. Mancuso's jaw tightened. They're hunting her because she's the only living witness to an attempted murder by the city's own police force. The realization hung in the air like smoke. If she talks, Carlos said slowly, if she tells anyone what she really saw. Empires fall, Mancuso finished. Politicians go to prison. Dirty cops lose their badges. The Kozlov pipeline gets exposed. Hundreds of powerful people lose everything. He picked up Debbie's torn jacket, feeling its weight. That girl, that homeless, invisible, throwaway girl, is the most dangerous person in this city right now. Because she knows the truth? Because she's innocent. Mancuso's voice was hard. And innocent people are the only ones who don't know when to stay silent. On the monitors, the press conference concluded with Commissioner Holland's final statement. Debbie Watson will be found. She will be stopped. She will face justice. Justice. The word tasted like poison. Mancuso turned to Carlo. Find her. Before they do. And then what? Mancuso stared at the jacket in his hands. Torn, stained, worthless to anyone except the girl who'd given up everything to save a stranger. Then I returned the favor. 6 weeks before the bridge. Mancuso's estate. Private conference room. Vincent Mancuso had built his empire on 3 rules. Never involve civilians, never touch children, and never trust anyone who broke the first 2. The man sitting across from him had just broken all 3. Dmitry Kozlov placed a leather folder on the mahogany table, his rings catching the chandelier light. 30 million in the first year alone, Vincent. The routes are established. The infrastructure exists. All we need is your distribution network. Mancuso didn't open the folder. He already knew what was inside. Shipping manifests. Border crossing schedules. Safehouse locations. And photographs of children. 12 years old. 10. 8. No, Mancuso said quietly. Kozlov's smile didn't waver. Perhaps you didn't hear the numbers. 30 million. I heard you. Mancuso stood, buttoning his suit jacket. The answer is no. Vincent, be reasonable. This is the future of our industry. The profit margins are. Mancuso's hand moved faster than Kozlov could react. He grabbed the Russian by the throat and slammed him against the wall, the chandelier swaying above them. You came into my house, Mancuso's voice was ice, and offered me children. Kozlov's face turned purple. His hands clawed at Mancuso's grip. If I ever see you again, Mancuso continued, I will kill you slowly. Do you understand? He released Kozlov, who collapsed gasping to the floor. Get out. Kozlov stumbled toward the door, then turned back, his eyes glittering with something darker than fear. You're making a mistake, Vincent. A very expensive mistake. I can afford it. After Kozlov left, Mancuso's Lieutenant Marco entered, his face grave. Boss, the council wants to meet. Tonight. Mancuso knew what that meant. They'd already made their decision. The council meeting, same night. 11 men sat around a table in a warehouse basement. These were Mancuso's inner circle, the captains who ran his territories, moved his money, enforced his will. Or so he'd thought. Kozlov's deal is worth more than our entire operation, said Salvatore, the eldest council member. You're letting personal feelings destroy a generational opportunity. I'm letting my principles keep us out of hell, Mancuso replied. Principles don't pay for lawyers when the feds come knocking, another captain interjected. This deal has protection from the top. Senators, judges, police commissioners. They're all invested in the Kozlov pipeline. Mancuso's blood ran cold. Who? Salvatore slid a document across the table. Names, positions, bank account numbers. Commissioner Patricia Holland, Senator James Morrison, Deputy Mayor Richard Butler, District Attorney Michael Torres. A dozen more. The entire city's power structure, all connected to Kozlov's trafficking network. They're not just allowing it, Salvatore said. They're profiting from it. And when you killed Kozlov's negotiator, you declared war on all of them. Then let them come, Mancuso said. They already have. Salvatore's voice was cold. We voted Vincent. 10-1. The deal moves forward. With or without you. The room fell silent. And if I refuse? Mancuso asked, though he already knew. Then you become a liability we can't afford. Mancuso looked around the table at men he'd fought beside for 20 years. Men whose families he'd protected. Whose children he'd sent to college. Not one met his eyes. Who votes to remove me? Mancuso asked. 10 hands rose. Only Marco kept his hand down, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. When? Mancuso asked calmly. Soon, Salvatore replied. We've made arrangements. It'll look like justice. The city will thank us for it. 2 weeks later, the setup. The police chase was staged perfectly. Mancuso's car had been spotted at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place. The pursuit led straight to Roosevelt Bridge. The crash through the barrier looked accidental. The cage waiting at the bottom was not. Sergeant Dawkins stood on the bridge, watching the metal box sink into black water, chains rattling. Beside him, Commissioner Holland spoke into her radio. Suspect has gone into the river. Rescue operations suspended due to dangerous conditions. There would be no rescue. The cage was designed to disappear, deep enough that recovery would take weeks, long enough for decomposition to erase evidence of the handcuffs, the beatings, the execution. A mob boss killed in a justified police chase. A tragic but necessary end. Everyone won except Mancuso. Dawkins checked his watch. 5 minutes and it's over. Holland nodded. Make sure your report is clean. No loose ends. Then a girl appeared on the bridge. Soaking wet. Shaking. Barefoot. Get her out of here, Dawkins snapped at his partner. But before anyone could move, the girl jumped. Holland's face went white. What is she doing? Underwater, Debbie Watson tore open a cage that was meant to stay closed forever. Get her when she surfaces, Holland hissed. Get them both. But when Debbie dragged Mancuso onto the riverbank, wrapped her jacket around his wounds, and whispered, "Run." She did something no one had planned for. She let him go. "Shoot her," Holland ordered. Dawkins raised his weapon. But news helicopters were already circling, cameras rolling, witnesses everywhere. Too many eyes. Holland grabbed Dawkins's arm. "Change of plan. We make her the accomplice. Frame her as part of Mancuso's network. She's homeless. Nobody." "Exactly. Who's going to believe her over us?" Present day, Mancuso's safe house. Mancuso finished explaining everything to Carlo, his voice hoarse from talking. "So that's why they're hunting her so hard," Carlo said slowly. "She didn't just save you. She witnessed your execution. And if she testifies, the entire conspiracy unravels. Senators, judges, commissioners, all of them go down for attempted murder and child trafficking. They'll never let her live long enough to talk." "I know." Mancuso picked up his phone. "That's why we move first." "Boss, you're talking about going to war with the entire city government." "I'm talking about protecting the only person who tried to save me when everyone else wanted me dead." Mancuso's eyes were hard. "She's 17 years old, Carlo. She had nothing. She was nothing to anyone. And she jumped into freezing water to pull me out of hell." He pulled up surveillance footage on his tablet. Debbie hiding in the abandoned textile factory, her hands infected, her body starving. What kind of monster would I be if I let them kill her for showing mercy? Carlo was quiet for a long moment. "The council will come for you too, the second they realize you're protecting her. Let them. This ends with both of you dead. Or," Mancuso said, standing, "it ends with the truth." He opened a safe in the wall, pulling out documents, bank records, audio recordings, video evidence of council meetings. "I've been preparing for this since the vote. Every transaction they made with Kozlov, every bribe they took, every child they sold. All of it. You're going to burn your own empire. I'm going to burn everyone who turned it into something I don't recognize." Mancuso loaded the documents into an encrypted drive. "But first, I need to keep her alive long enough to tell the truth." His phone buzzed. A message from one of his street informants. "Council meeting tonight. Target. The girl. Orders are shoot on sight. They're sending everyone." Mancuso showed Carlo the message. "How long do we have?" "Hours. Maybe less." Carlo grabbed his jacket. "I'll get our people ready." "Carlo." Mancuso's voice stopped him at the door. "When this is over, most of us won't be walking away." "I know, boss." "Why are you still here?" Carlo smiled grimly. "Because 20 years ago, you pulled my sister out of a trafficking ring. You burned that whole operation to the ground and never asked for anything in return. You think I forgot?" Mancuso clasped his lieutenant's shoulder. "Get the girl. Bring her here." "And Carlo?" "Yeah, boss. Tell her the truth. All of it. She deserves to know why she's about to die." Abandoned textile factory. Debbie's location. Debbie jolted awake to the sound of footsteps. Multiple sets. Heavy. Professional. She grabbed the stolen tablet and ran deeper into the factory, her infected hands screaming with pain. Behind her, men spread out systematically, cutting off exits. "Debbie Watson," a voice called. "We just want to talk." She knew that voice. Salvatore, Mancuso's council member. She'd seen his face on the surveillance footage from the anonymous sender. She climbed a rusted ladder to the second floor, her bare feet slipping on corroded metal. "The girl saved your boss's life." Debbie shouted down. "Why are you hunting me?" "Because you saw what you shouldn't have seen," Salvatore replied. "And because dead witnesses don't testify." Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through metal around her. Debbie ran, glass crunching under her feet, blood leaving a trail behind her. She burst through a door onto a catwalk suspended 30 feet above the factory floor. Dead end. Below, 6 men aimed their weapons up at her. Debbie's hands gripped the railing, her vision swimming from blood loss and starvation. This was it. This was how mercy ended. Then the factory lights exploded. Darkness swallowed everything. More gunfire. Shouting. Chaos. Strong hands grabbed Debbie's arm in the dark. "Come with me if you want to live." Carlo's voice. "Who?" "Mancuso sent me." "Move. Now." They descended in darkness while gunfire and screams echoed around them. Carlo moved like a ghost, navigating blind, pulling Debbie toward an exit she couldn't see. They burst into an alley where a black SUV waited, engine running. Carlo shoved her into the back seat. "Stay down." The SUV peeled away just as Salvatore's men emerged from the factory, firing after them. In the driver's seat, another of Mancuso's men navigated side streets at breakneck speed. Debbie lay on the floor, her heart hammering, her mind reeling. "Where are you taking me?" "To the only person who knows the whole truth," Carlo replied. "Who?" "The man you saved." The SUV turned down a hidden driveway. Debbie was about to meet Vincent Mancuso and learn that saving his life had marked them both for death. Mancuso's safe house. The meeting. Debbie stood in Mancuso's study, her infected hands wrapped in clean bandages, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. He sat across from her, the man whose life she'd saved, studying her with eyes that had seen too much death. "You know what they're saying about you?" Mancuso asked quietly. "That I'm a terrorist, a criminal, a monster. They're saying that because the truth is worse." He slid a folder across the desk. "Open it." Inside were photographs, documents, names, bank transfers totaling hundreds of millions. And children, dozens of them, eyes hollow, faces blank. Debbie's hand shook. "What is this?" "Kozlov's trafficking network. The one I refused to join. The one that got me marked for execution." Mancuso leaned forward. "You pulled me from that cage, Debbie. But you pulled out more than a man. You pulled out the only witness who could expose every powerful person in this city." "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. That's what makes you dangerous." His voice was almost gentle. "You're innocent. And innocent people don't know when to stay quiet." "So what happens now?" Mancuso stood, walking to the window. "Now we both run. Or we burn it all down. Your choice." Before Debbie could answer, Carlo burst into the room, his phone in hand. "Boss, we have a problem. They just went international." He turned on the television. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, every major news network on Earth showing the same image. Debbie's face. Interpol red notice issued for Debbie Watson. Wanted. International terrorist conspiracy. The news anchor's voice cut through the static. In an unprecedented move, the United States has issued international warrants for 17-year-old Debbie Watson, now considered one of the world's most dangerous fugitives. Borders are closing, Carlos said. Airports. Ports. Every crossing from Canada to Mexico. Facial recognition activated in 47 countries. Debbie felt the walls closing in. I can't even leave the city and they're shutting down entire countries? Because you're not just a witness anymore, Mancuso said grimly. You're a symbol. Proof that their system can be disrupted by one person. They need to make an example of you. The broadcast continued. Reward has been increased to $2.5 million. Watson is considered armed and extremely dangerous. Armed. She'd never held a gun in her life. It gets worse, Carlo added, pulling up his phone. Social media was exploding. #DebbieItch trending worldwide with 47 million posts. But the posts were divided. #Debbie is a monster. Millions calling for her execution. #Save Debbie Watson. Others questioning the narrative. #What is they covering? Conspiracy theorists digging into inconsistencies. One viral post showed side-by-side images. Debbie's bleeding hands on the riverbank versus the police claim she was trained operative. Does this look like a professional to you? Or a scared kid? Another post. If she's such a dangerous terrorist, why did she give him her jacket and tell him to run? Why didn't she run with him? The narrative was cracking. Public opinion is splitting, Carlo observed. Some people are actually defending her. That makes her more dangerous, not less, Mancuso replied. If she becomes a folk hero, the whole system collapses. His phone buzzed. A message from an encrypted source. Mancuso's face went pale. What? Debbie asked. They're activating everyone. 5 nations. 12 intelligence agencies. Black Ops teams deployed. He looked at her. They're not trying to arrest you anymore, Debbie. They're trying to erase you. 72 hours later. Running. Debbie had been moving for 3 days straight. Mancuso had given her resources. A new identity, cash, safe houses. But every safe house burned the moment she arrived. Every identity lasted hours before being compromised. The facial recognition was everywhere. Traffic cameras. Security systems. Even people's phones were scanning crowds automatically. She dyed her hair. Changed her clothes. Walked differently. It didn't matter. The world had learned her face too well. But something strange was happening. On the second day, hiding in a condemned apartment building, Debbie heard crying through the walls. A girl's voice. Young. Terrified. She should have kept moving. Instead, she kicked down the door. 3 men. One 13-year-old girl handcuffed to a radiator. Cameras set up. The kind of room nightmares are made of. Debbie didn't think. She grabbed a metal pipe from the debris-filled hallway and swung. 10 minutes later, 3 traffickers lay unconscious. The girl was free, wrapped in Debbie's jacket. She'd stolen a new one. running toward the police station with an address Debbie had scrawled on her arm. Debbie disappeared before sirens arrived. But someone had filmed it. The video went viral within an hour. Wanted fugitive saves kidnapped girl. The comments exploded. Terrorists don't rescue children. What if we've been lied to? This girl is a hero. The next day, in a subway tunnel, Debbie found 2 homeless kids, brothers, maybe 9 and 11, being shaken down by gang members demanding territory taxes. She intervened again. Another video. Another rescue. Debbie Watson saves homeless children. The narrative was shifting. News channels started asking questions. Who is the real Debbie Watson? Podcasts dissected her story. Lawyers offered pro bono defense. Activists organized protests. #TheRealDebbie started trending. In Geneva, a UN Human Rights Council member called for an investigation. In Washington, 3 senators demanded answers about the irregularities in her case. The cracks were becoming canyons. Command Center. Federal Building. Commissioner Holland watched the protests on multiple screens, her jaw tight. She's becoming a martyr, Senator Morrison said beside her. Every time she saves someone, more people question our narrative. Then we stop giving her opportunities to save people. Holland turned to her tactical commander. I want her cornered. No civilians. No cameras. No mercy. Where? Holland pulled up a map. The city's underground, old subway tunnels, maintenance corridors, abandoned infrastructure. She's been using the underground to move. We flood it with teams. Cut off every exit. Trap her like a rat. And when we find her, Holland's eyes were cold. Eliminate the threat. Claim she attacked first. Make it clean. What about the public backlash? There won't be any. Not if there's no body to question. No trial to scrutinize. Just an unfortunate accident in a dangerous chase. Morrison nodded slowly. Make it happen. The underground. Debbie's final refuge. Debbie descended into the old subway tunnels, her new burner phone showing a message from Mancuso. They're coming for you. Tonight. Underground is compromised. Need extraction coordinates now. She started typing her location, then heard it. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Echoing through the tunnels from every direction. Flashlight beams cutting through darkness. Radio chatter bouncing off concrete walls. Target spotted. Section 7. All units converge. Debbie ran. Behind her, tactical teams spread out like a net, closing every passage, sealing every exit. Infrared scanners. Motion detectors. Heat sensors. She was being hunted by the most advanced technology on Earth. Her phone buzzed again. Tell me where you are. I can get you out. But Debbie looked at the map on her phone. Every tunnel was turning red, enemy positions filling in like blood spreading through veins. There was nowhere to run. She typed back, too late. They're everywhere. Mancuso's response came instantly. Then we go to Plan B. What's Plan B? You stay alive long enough for me to tell the truth. Debbie turned a corner and froze. 20 tactical operators blocked the tunnel ahead, red laser sights painting her chest. She spun around. 15 more behind her. She was surrounded in an abandoned subway station. Water dripping from ancient pipes, rats scattering in the shadows. Above, through maintenance grates, she could see television news vans positioning themselves. They'd been tipped off. This wasn't an arrest. It was an execution. Broadcast live. A loudspeaker crackled. "Debbie Watson, you are surrounded. Put your hands up and surrender." She raised her hands slowly, her bandaged fingers trembling. A sniper's laser sight appeared on her forehead. On every news channel around the world, the headline appeared. Breaking. Fugitive Debbie Watson cornered. Live coverage. 50 million people watched, waiting to see if the girl who saved lives would be killed for it. Debbie closed her eyes, thinking of her mother, of Mancuso drowning in that cage, of the children she'd rescued. At least she'd tried to be better than the world. Then the lights went out. All of them. The entire underground went pitch black. And in the darkness, a voice spoke over every tactical team's radio simultaneously. Mancuso's voice. "Gentlemen, I'm about to make you all very famous. For all the wrong reasons." Abandoned subway station. Section 7 live on 147 news networks worldwide. The darkness lasted exactly 3 seconds. Long enough for 50 million viewers to hold their breath. Long enough for 35 tactical operators to switch to night vision. Long enough for Debbie Watson to realize she was about to die on camera. Then emergency lighting kicked in. Dim, red, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. The abandoned subway station materialized from shadow. Cracked tile walls covered in decades of graffiti, flooded tracks reflecting the crimson glow, water dripping from rusted pipes overhead. Debbie stood in the center of the platform, hands raised, surrounded by weapons. Above, through maintenance grates and ventilation shafts, news cameras captured everything. Helicopter spotlights cut through the openings, creating columns of light in the darkness. Debbie Watson, the tactical commander's voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "You have 10 seconds to comply. Get on your knees. Hands behind your head." She didn't move. Not because she was brave. Because her legs wouldn't work anymore. 3 days running. No food. Infected hands. Exhaustion so complete it felt like drowning while standing. 10. A sniper's red dot centered on her chest. 9. More dots appeared. 5. 10. 15 laser sights painting her body like a constellation. 8. On CNN, the anchor whispered, "This is unprecedented. We are watching a live apprehension of one of the world's most wanted fugitives." 7. Debbie's lips moved, forming words no one could hear. "I'm sorry, Mom." 6. In the command center, Commissioner Holland leaned forward, her knuckles white against the desk. "The moment she moves, you have green light." 5. Senator Morrison stood beside her, phone in hand, already preparing the press release. Fugitive resisted arrest. Officers had no choice. Justice served. 4. Debbie's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the wet platform, her hands splashing into flooded water. 3. 20 fingers tightened on 20 triggers. 2. The world watched a 17-year-old girl wait to die. 1. Then every light in the underground exploded simultaneously. Not flickered. Not dimmed. Exploded. Sparks rained from overhead fixtures. Emergency lights burst in cascades of glass. The tactical team's night vision goggles whited out, blinding operators who'd been staring through amplified screens. Screams. Confusion. The sound of 35 elite soldiers suddenly rendered useless. Smoke grenades detonated from the tunnel entrances. Thick, gray, choking smoke that swallowed the station whole. Above ground, news cameras lost visual. Helicopters pulled back as smoke billowed through ventilation grates. In the darkness and chaos, Debbie felt hands grab her arms. Not rough. Not violent. "Stay down," Carlo's voice whispered in her ear. "Don't move. Don't speak." The tactical teams fired blindly into smoke. Bullets ricocheted off tile and concrete, sparks illuminating panicked faces for split seconds. "Cease fire. Cease fire." The commander screamed into his radio. The shooting stopped. Silence fell except for coughing, the drip of water, the hum of disabled electronics. Then footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Echoing through the smoky darkness. A single figure emerged from the northern tunnel, backlit by emergency lighting from deeper in the system. The smoke parted around him like a curtain. Vincent Mancuso stepped into view. He wore no mask, no disguise, no attempt to hide. His face, the face that had been on wanted posters for 20 years, the face that appeared in crime documentaries and FBI briefings, was fully visible to every camera still recording. The tactical commander's voice cracked. "Mancuso, get on the ground. Now." Mancuso ignored him. He walked calmly through the smoke, through the laser sights, through the absolute certainty of death, until he stood directly in front of where Debbie crouched. He looked down at her. This broken, starving, terrified girl who'd saved his life, and something in his expression softened. Then he turned to face the tactical teams. "Stand down," Mancuso said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the station with absolute authority. "You're surrounded," the commander responded. "There's no escape." "I said stand down." Mancuso reached into his jacket. 50 weapons trained on him. He pulled out not a gun, but a phone. He held it up so the cameras above could see the screen. "Commissioner Holland," Mancuso called up toward the grates. "I know you're watching. I know you're listening. So let me be very clear about what happens next." He tapped the phone. Above ground, every news network's feed suddenly split screen. On one side, the subway standoff. On the other, documents, bank transfers, photographs, meeting transcripts, audio recordings. Names scrolled across the screen. Holland, Morrison, Torres, Watson, Kozlov, the trafficking network, the conspiracy, everything. "I've uploaded this to 47 servers across 20 countries," Mancuso continued, his voice steady. "If anything happens to me, if anything happens to her, it releases automatically to every news agency, every law enforcement body, every government in the world." In the command center, Holland's face went white. "You're bluffing," the tactical commander said, though his voice betrayed doubt. "Am I?" Mancuso gestured to the cameras. "The whole world is watching right now. Do you really want to risk it?" The commander's hand moved to his radio, waiting for orders that didn't come. "Here's what's going to happen," Mancuso said. "Your teams are going to withdraw. You're going to let us walk out of here. And in return, I'll give you 24 hours to start running before I release everything. You're protecting a terrorist, the commander said. I'm protecting a child who saved my life. Mancuso's voice hardened. A child your people framed because she witnessed your attempted murder of me. On every screen, the documents kept scrolling. Viewers around the world were reading, understanding, questioning. The comment sections exploded. Oh my God, it's all real. They tried to kill him. The police tried to kill him. She was set up. She was innocent all along. The narrative was collapsing in real time. Commissioner, the tactical commander said into his radio. Orders. Silence. Commissioner. Finally, Holland's voice came through, barely controlled. Fall back. Let them go. Ma'am, we have them. I said fall back. That's an order. The tactical teams slowly lowered their weapons, confusion and anger evident in their body language. They backed away, creating a corridor through the smoke. Mancuso reached down and pulled Debbie to her feet. She swayed, barely conscious, and he steadied her with one hand. Can you walk? He asked quietly. She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Carlo appeared from the shadows with 3 other men. Mancuso's loyalists, the ones who'd stayed when everyone else betrayed him. Together, they walked toward the south tunnel. The tactical teams watched them go, weapons lowered but ready. Above, news helicopters tracked their movement through the underground system. The world watched Vincent Mancuso, crime boss, fugitive, ghost, publicly protect a homeless girl who'd shown him mercy. At the tunnel entrance, Mancuso stopped and turned back. Commissioner Holland, he called up to the cameras. Senator Morrison. District Attorney Torres. Everyone who signed off on the Kozlov deal. He held up his phone again. You have 24 hours. Then the truth comes out. All of it. Every name. Every crime. Every child. His eyes were cold as ice. Use that time wisely. Because when this is over, you'll wish you'd let me drown. He and Debbie disappeared into the darkness. The tactical team stood frozen, unsure whether they'd just failed or been played. Above ground, Commissioner Holland stared at the monitors, her career imploding in real time. On social media, the hashtags shifted. Hashtag Debbie was innocent. Hashtag what are they hiding? Hashtag release the files. The conspiracy was exposed. But Mancuso's final words echoed in the silence. This isn't over. Because in 24 hours, the real war would begin. And this time the whole world would be watching. Command Center. Moments after. Holland smashed her coffee cup against the wall. Get every asset we have. Federal, state, local, international. I want them found before that deadline. Ma'am, her assistant said carefully, the public is already questioning. I don't care about the public. Holland screamed. I care about 24 hours. If those files go public, we all go to prison for the rest of our lives. Senator Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up with a face like death. That was Kozlov. He's activating his people. Says if we can't contain this, he will. What does that mean? It means we're not the only ones hunting them anymore. Morrison's voice was hollow. It means everyone who's invested in that pipeline is sending killers. Professionals. The kind that don't miss. Holland turned to her tactical commander. How long can they hide? If Mancuso's using his network? Days. Maybe a week. We don't have a week. We have hours. She pulled up a city map. Where would he take her? The commander studied the screen. Somewhere defensible. Somewhere with escape routes. Somewhere he can make a final stand. Find it. And when you do. Holland's expression was granite. No cameras this time. No witnesses. No mercy. What about the files? We'll deal with that after they're dead. Can't release files if you're not alive to click send. She looked at the frozen image of Debbie and Mancuso on the monitor, walking away through smoke and shadow. This isn't over, she whispered, echoing Mancuso's words. Not by a long shot. Mancuso's final safe house. 18 hours until deadline. The building was a forgotten relic, an old television studio from the 1970s, abandoned when digital killed analog, now hidden beneath layers of the city's infrastructure. Perfect for what Mancuso had planned. Debbie sat in what used to be a broadcast booth, her hands freshly bandaged, her body fed for the first time in days. She looked stronger, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd learned too much about the world. Mancuso stood by the window, watching the city lights. Behind him, Carlo and 3 technicians worked frantically, connecting equipment, running cables, preparing for something Debbie didn't yet understand. I need to show you something, Mancuso said finally. He opened a laptop and turned it toward her. The screen showed a beach. Turquoise water. White sand. A small house with solar panels. Costa Rica, Mancuso explained. No extradition treaty. New identity already prepared. Bank accounts in your name. Enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. He pulled out a passport. The photo was Debbie's face, but the name read Maria Santos. I don't understand, Debbie whispered. You disappear. Tonight. Private plane leaves in 4 hours. By morning, you're drinking coffee on a beach, and Debbie Watson stops existing. His voice was gentle. You get to live, Debbie. Isn't that what you want? She stared at the passport, at the life she could have. Safety. Peace. Freedom. What about the files? She asked. I release them. I tell the truth. But you're already gone. They can't touch you. And the children. The ones still in cages. Mancuso's jaw tightened. That's not your burden to carry. But it is. Debbie's voice grew stronger. The moment I pulled you from that river, it became mine. You said it yourself. I saw what I shouldn't have seen. I'm the only one who's completely innocent in all of this. Which is exactly why you should run. No. She pushed the passport back toward him. Innocent means my word matters. Innocent means when I speak, people might actually listen. You release those files, they'll say you're just a criminal trying to deflect. But me. She stood, her legs shaky but determined. I'm the girl who saved lives while running for her own. I'm the one they turned into a monster on TV. If I tell the truth, people will believe it. Because I have nothing to gain and everything to lose. Mancuso studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're choosing? There's no coming back from this. The moment you go public, every intelligence agency on Earth will hunt you forever. They're already hunting me. Not like this. Right now, you're a fugitive. After this broadcast, you'll be the person who toppled governments. They'll never stop. Debbie looked at the laptop screen, at the beach and the life she'd never have. Then she closed it. My mother died begging for help that never came, she said quietly. I won't let those children die the same way. Not when I can do something about it. Mancuso's expression shifted, respect mixing with something that might have been grief. You're 17 years old. You shouldn't have to make this choice. But I do. And I am. She met his eyes. So let's burn it all down. 6 hours later, the broadcast. Every screen on Earth went black simultaneously. Not just news networks. Everything. Times Square. Piccadilly Circus. Shibuya Crossing. Every digital billboard, every public monitor, every streaming service. Black. Then a single image appeared. Debbie Watson's face. Not the mugshot. Not the security footage. A new photo, bruised but defiant, eyes blazing with purpose. Text scrolled beneath. The truth about Debbie Watson. In the command center, Commissioner Holland screamed into her phone. Cut the feed. Cut everything. We're trying. It's coming from everywhere, routed through 1,000 different sources. I don't care. Shut it down. But the broadcast continued. Debbie's voice, steady and clear. My name is Debbie Watson. I'm 17 years old. 6 days ago, I saved a drowning man from the Roosevelt River. That decision made me the most wanted fugitive on Earth. Not because I committed a crime. Because I witnessed one. The screen changed. Security footage from the bridge. The unedited version. Sergeant Dawkins laughing. Holland giving orders. The cage designed to never surface. They called it a police chase. It was an execution. More footage. Council meetings. Mancuso refusing the Kozlov deal. The vote to remove him. Vincent Mancuso was going to be killed because he refused to traffic children. And I was going to be killed because I saw it happen. The screen filled with documents. Names appeared one by one. Commissioner Patricia Holland. $4.7 million. Senator James Morrison. $8.2 million. District Attorney Michael Torres. $3.1 million. Deputy Mayor Richard Butler. $5.4 million. Each name accompanied by bank transfers, wire receipts, offshore accounts. These people profit from selling children. And when one man said no, they tried to make him disappear. Photographs of children appeared. Not graphic. Just faces. Young faces. Scared faces. These are some of the victims. 12 years old. 10. 8. Taken from their families and sold like property. In Washington, Senator Morrison's phone exploded with calls. He didn't answer any of them. In the mayor's office, Deputy Mayor Butler quietly removed his tie and walked to his window, 17 floors up. In a luxury penthouse, District Attorney Torres watched his career dissolve in real time. The broadcast continued. Audio recordings played, voices discussing routes, prices, protection payoffs. I'm not asking you to believe me because I'm innocent, Debbie said, her face returning to the screen. I'm asking you to believe the evidence. Look at the names. Follow the money. Save the children. She paused, and for the first time, her voice cracked. My mother died because no one helped when she asked. I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you, this is happening. These people are real. These crimes are real. And if you do nothing, you're part of it. Behind her, Mancuso appeared on screen for the first time. Everything she said is true, he stated flatly. And I have copies of every document, every recording, every piece of evidence uploaded to 40 international human rights organizations. The information is public now. What you do with it is your choice. He placed his hand on Debbie's shoulder. This girl saved my life. Now I'm asking the world to save hers. The screen began to flicker. They're triangulating the source. Carlos shouted. 30 seconds. We need to move. Mancuso grabbed Debbie's arm. Wait, she said, looking directly into the camera. To everyone who called me a terrorist, a criminal, a monster, you were right to be angry. Just not at me. Be angry at the people who made you believe their lies. Be angry at the system that protects predators. Be angry enough to change it. 20 seconds. And to the children still waiting for help. The broadcast cut to black. Worldwide reaction. Immediate. CNN. We're receiving reports of mass arrests. BBC. 3 senators have resigned. Al Jazeera. International Criminal Court opening investigation. Fox News. Federal buildings being raided by FBI. The hashtags exploded. Hashtag they lied about Debbie. 89 million posts. Hashtag find the children. 124 million posts. Hashtag Holland resign NOW. 67 million posts. In Geneva, the UN Security Council called an emergency session. In Washington, the FBI director ordered raids on 17 government offices. In Moscow, Dmitry Kozlov boarded a private jet to a country without extradition. The world was burning. And at the center of it all, Debbie Watson vanished. The studio moments after broadcast. The tactical teams breached the building 3 minutes too late. They found the broadcast equipment still warm. They found evidence of 5 people fleeing. They found blood, a few drops, typo positive, matching Debbie Watson's records. But they found no bodies. The building had 17 exit points. Underground tunnels, rooftop access, basement passages leading to the subway system. By the time they sealed the perimeter, the fugitives were gone. Commissioner Holland arrived personally, her career already in ruins, her legacy destroyed. She stood in the empty broadcast booth, staring at the chair where Debbie had sat. Is she alive? Holland asked. The tactical commander shook his head. We don't know. Blood trail leads to the basement, then disappears. Either someone carried her or... He didn't finish the sentence. Holland's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You made her into a monster. She showed you what real monsters look like. She looked at the blood drops on the floor. On every news channel, Debbie's face appeared with a new caption. Hero or martyr. The fate of Debbie Watson. The world wanted answers. Dead or alive. captured or free, victim or victor. Nobody knew. And in a city of 12 million people, in a world connected by infinite screens, Debbie Watson became something more powerful than a fugitive. She became a ghost. Federal Courthouse. 6 weeks after the broadcast, Vincent Mancuso walked into the FBI field office at dawn, alone, his hands raised. No lawyers. No guns. No escape plan. Just a man keeping a promise. "My name is Vincent Mancuso," he said to the stunned agents at the front desk. "And I'm here to testify against everyone." The building erupted in controlled chaos. Within an hour, the most wanted crime boss in American history sat in an interrogation room, a stack of hard drives on the table between him and a team of federal prosecutors. "These contain everything," Mancuso said. 20 years of recordings. Financial transactions. Names. Locations. Every piece of evidence you need to dismantle Kozlov's pipeline and prosecute every official who profited from it. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Catherine Ross, stared at him with open suspicion. Why? Why turn yourself in? Why cooperate? Mancuso's eyes were tired but clear. "Because a 17-year-old girl taught me that some things are worth more than survival. She chose truth over safety. The least I can do is make sure her sacrifice wasn't for nothing." Where is she? Gone. And that's all you need to know. The trials, 3 months later. The trials became the most watched legal proceedings in human history. Commissioner Patricia Holland, convicted on 14 counts including conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and child trafficking. Sentenced to life without parole. Senator James Morrison, resigned before arrest. Convicted on 19 counts. 45 years. District Attorney Michael Torres, died by suicide the night before his arrest warrant was issued. Deputy Mayor Richard Butler, convicted on 11 counts. 28 years. The list went on. 37 government officials. 42 police officers. 19 federal agents. 8 judges. All convicted. All imprisoned. The Kozlov pipeline collapsed. International raids rescued 847 children from 18 countries. 14 trafficking rings destroyed in coordinated operations across 4 continents. And at the center of every trial, every testimony, every piece of evidence, the ghost of Debbie Watson. Her broadcast. Her courage. Her refusal to look away. Mancuso testified for 43 days straight. He held nothing back. His own crimes. His empire. His sins. "I'm a criminal," he told the court during his sentencing. "I've done terrible things. I deserve prison. But those children didn't deserve what was done to them. And Debbie Watson didn't deserve to be hunted for showing mercy." The judge sentenced him to 20 years. He accepted it without appeal. One question the judge asked before he was taken away: "Do you know if she's alive?" Mancuso smiled faintly. "I know that 6 children were pulled from a trafficking house in Berlin 2 weeks ago. I know that a corrupt police captain in Manila was exposed by leaked documents last month. I know that evil keeps getting found in places it thought it was safe." That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Around the world. The sightings. Berlin, 4 months after the broadcast. A locked basement. 6 children chained to walls. guards outside, then smoke under the door, coughing, confusion. When the guards regained consciousness, the children were gone. The chains cut. A note left behind. Your secrets aren't safe anymore. DC. Security footage showed a figure in dark clothes, face covered, moving like smoke through the building. Someone who knew exactly where the children were, exactly how many guards, exactly when to strike. The internet exploded with speculation. Hashtag Debbie in Berlin, Manila. 5 months after the broadcast, Captain Reyes had been untouchable for 12 years. Payoffs, connections, power. Then his computer was hacked. Every file, every transaction, every victim, released to the press at exactly 3 a.m. By sunrise, he was in custody. By noon, riots surrounded the police station demanding justice. A street vendor claimed she'd seen a young woman watching from across the street, a torn denim jacket wrapped around her shoulders despite the heat. She looked like she'd been through hell, the vendor told reporters. But her eyes were like fire. Hashtag Debbie in Manila trended for 3 days. Bangkok, 6 months after. A trafficking auction. The wealthy elite bidding on children in a luxury hotel. The lights went out mid-auction. When they came back on, the children were gone. The buyers found themselves locked in the room, police sirens already approaching. Someone had called in an anonymous tip, complete with photographs, audio recordings, and the exact room number. One buyer swore he saw a girl's reflection in a mirror during the blackout. Young, bruised, determined. Hashtag Debbie in Bangkok. London, 7 months after. A member of parliament with ties to Kozlov's network. Protected by immunity. Unreachable. Until his offshore accounts were exposed. Until his hidden properties were revealed. Until every secret he'd kept for 20 years appeared in the media overnight. He resigned in disgrace. The leak was traced to a cafe in Camden where a young woman with dyed hair and scarred hands had used the Wi-Fi for exactly 17 minutes before disappearing. Hashtag Debbie in London. The myth grows. She became an urban legend. A ghost story that evil told itself at night. Some claimed she was dead, that these were copycats using her name. Others swore they'd seen her. Always in the shadows, always moving, always hunting. The reward remained active. $2.5 million for information leading to her capture. No one collected it. Because everyone who might have seen her had also seen what she was doing. And somehow, turning her in felt like betraying something important. Something the world needed. FBI headquarters. 1 year after. Agent Ross reviewed the file marked Watson, Debbie, active fugitive. 43 sightings across 19 countries. 17 trafficking operations disrupted. 11 corrupt officials exposed. 0 confirmed photographs. 0 confirmed captures. She's either the luckiest fugitive alive, Ross's partner said, or she's being protected. By who? By everyone. Look at the patterns. Every time we get close, someone tips her off. Every safe house we find has been cleaned out hours before we arrive. Every contact we flip suddenly doesn't remember anything useful. Ross studied the map on her wall, pins marking every Debbie sighting. They formed a pattern, a web connecting trafficking hubs, corrupt officials, centers of exploitation. "She's not running," Ross said quietly. "She's hunting. Then we need to stop her." "Do we?" Ross looked at her partner. "In the year since her broadcast, we've rescued more trafficking victims than in the previous decade. We've arrested more corrupt officials than in agency history. Crime families are terrified. Politicians are cleaning house because they're afraid she'll expose them next. She's still a fugitive. She broke the law. She saved a drowning man. Everything else was done to her." Ross closed the file. "But officially, we keep looking. We keep the investigation active. And unofficially?" Ross walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. "Unofficially, I hope she stays gone, because she's doing more good as a ghost than she ever could locked in a cell." Somewhere in the world, present day, a young woman sat in a cafe, a laptop open before her, a cup of black coffee cooling beside her hands. Her hair was different. Her face was thinner. Her eyes were older than they should be. But she was alive. On the laptop screen, security footage from a warehouse in Sao Paulo. Children visible through a doorway. Guards on rotation. A pattern emerging. She studied the footage with the intensity of someone who'd learned that looking away had consequences. Behind her, a news broadcast played on the cafe television. Mancuso continues to cooperate with authorities from federal prison. His testimony has led to 127 additional arrests. When asked about Debbie Watson, he had only this to say: "I hope she finds peace." The young woman's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Peace would come later. After the children were safe. After the guilty were punished. After the world learned that mercy had teeth. She closed the laptop, left money for the coffee she hadn't drunk, and walked into the crowded street. Within seconds, she was invisible again. Just another face in a city of millions. Just another ghost with a conscience. Behind her, on the cafe table, she'd left a small note weighted down by the coffee cup. "The warehouse on Rua de Esperança. Tonight at midnight. Bring bolt cutters and ambulances. DC." The waitress found it 5 minutes later and immediately called the police. By the time they raided the warehouse, they'd find 16 children and enough evidence to dismantle a network that had operated for 8 years. They'd also find another note. "Keep looking. There are more." The story of Debbie Watson became something larger than truth, stranger than fiction. Some said she died in that broadcast studio, bleeding out while the world watched governments fall. Some said she was living quietly somewhere, her work done, her conscience clear. Some said she was still out there, still fighting, still refusing to look away. The only certainty was this: somewhere in the dark corners of the world, where evil thought it was safe, where predators thought they were untouchable, where the powerful thought they were protected, a girl with scarred hands and fierce eyes was watching. And when she moved, empires trembled. The international community still listed her as a fugitive. The FBI still maintained an active investigation. The reward still stood at $2.5 million. But on the streets, in the shelters, in the places where throwaways and forgotten people gathered, they told a different story. They spoke of a guardian who appeared in smoke and shadow. They spoke of a ghost who saved children and exposed evil. They spoke of a girl who chose truth when the world chose lies. And in those stories, she wasn't a criminal. She was a legend. The world still called her a fugitive. The law still called her wanted. The powerful still called her dangerous. But the children she saved called her hope. And evil, true evil, the kind that thrived in darkness and fed on silence. Evil knew her as something far more terrifying than a fugitive. Evil knew her as the girl who never looked away. Thanks for watching till the very end. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be dropping another unforgettable story tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it.